So when you were growing up, what did you watch and what influenced you culturally? I mean, I can speak for myself. In my case, I love Lucy, and listening to Ricky Ricardo speak Spanish is very exciting. I could identify with that.
Yes.
You know? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I grew up in an environment that was bilingual and bicultural, so I watched those types of shows, and I also watched telenovelas in Spanish. How about you?
Sanford and Son. You know, Good Times. And I loved all the Norman Lear shows like Maude, because I sort of loved the way B. Arthur looked. And I loved all those nice feminist statements that she would make. I don't know, it intrigued me, even though I didn't understand it at that time. And I loved Good Times because I liked Michael when he would say, boy is a white racist term. And I'd go, really? Wow, it just made me lean in to see a black family in Chicago in the 70s, you know. I saw myself, you know.
That's important, seeing yourself. You grew up in England.
I grew up in England, and the British obsession is with class more than it is with race or religion. So it was all Monty Python and the Barchester Chronicles. But my parents were South African, and this was during the apartheid era, and the television there was, of course, aggressively white. And so the only shows we really saw were American imports. Many of the Norman Lear shows, of course, were British shows, but they'd been transposed. And Sound of and Sub was a class show in the UK. But we watched Starsky and Hutch, and we sort of saw the rules, which was Starsky and Hutch's boss could be black, but Starsky had to be white, and Hutch had to be very white indeed. and you know, one of the shocking things when I started at ABC 5 years ago is how many of those rules were still in place. I'd like to think they've been broken now, but that's what we saw.
Ilene, how about you?
Well, I certainly didn't see myself in any of the television I watched growing up. I didn't really know I was gay, so I don't know if it's really a fair premise, but...
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and there were no gay characters on television at the time. The shows that I remember from my earliest childhood were Bewitched, the Beverly Hillbillies. Those were my shows. A couple of cartoons that I watched, and Dark Shadows, which was kind of sexy and subversive.
You know, sometimes you have to think about whether you should say the shows or not, because then you're dating yourself and people will know how old you are. Depending on what show. Are you alive then when those shows were still on? It's horrible when I ask people, do you know this person or that actor or this actress or this show? They say, huh? I said, oh my God, you're so young. I can't believe that you don't know them.
By the way, I never saw myself on an English television screen, and just thinking about this, maybe that's why we did the Goldbergs in the end, because that's like a documentary of my youth.
Viola, you were the first black woman to win a Best Actress Emmy for drama, and you famously said, definitely, she deserves that. The only thing that separates women of color from anyone else is opportunity. Now in 2015, do you still feel that way? Are you satisfied with the opportunities that exist out there for women of color?
I'm more satisfied than I was 2 years ago, but I'm not entirely satisfied. You know, when you grow up, you want the whole pie. You don't want the 12.5% of the pie. We don't tell our kids that. If you're 12.5% of the population, you only deserve that 12% of the pie. You want the whole thing.
Right.
But
you're not even getting that 12%. It's not even up to that point.
No, it's not up to that point. But I think that people feel like you should be satisfied if you see Taraji P. Henson, you know, Kerry Washington, Megan Good, Halle Berry. You know, you should just kind of sit back and be quiet. But I always say Meryl Streep could never have been Meryl Streep without Sophie's Choice, without The Cry in the Dark, without Devil Wears Prada. She had narratives that made her talent shine. If you're the detective or the third girl from the left, then all your potential is being flushed down the toilet. And then I just had an interview with Pete Travers, and he said, but what about Meryl Streep, who I love, by the way? In Deer Hunter, that role was very small, but I said, it's not the same as being the detective in Disturbia, coming into the home and going, so where were you yesterday? And did you see so-and-so? But people don't understand that there's a difference between opportunity and talent. That because we're not out there doesn't mean that we don't have the talent, we don't have the potential. We're just kind of heat-seeking missiles looking for those narratives that can make us shine.
Right. How does television compare to film in that sense?
Way more opportunity in television than film. Film is just almost a wasteland right now.
And why do you think that is?
I have no idea. I mean, what they tell us it is that we don't translate in the international market, that we can't pull an audience in. It's why I could be on the A-list and make $100 a day in per diem, but a Caucasian woman who is on the A-list makes $50,000 a week in per diem. But we are somehow in the same boat, brother. We're not. I'm not saying that to be divisive. I'm saying that to speak the truth. But supposedly, we just don't translate, which is a larger conversation, which we don't have time for.
But the key is that there will always be obstacles.
Yes.
And we had many, many voices who said to us, you know, it will be hard to sell, it will be hard to sell in the US, it will be hard to syndicate, it will be hard to go around the world. And the truth is, you know, you put up Scandal, and it's an extraordinary piece of television, and the world wants to watch it. Right. And then, you know, we look, the script for How to Get Away with Murder was spectacular. We loved it. Pete Nowalk's a fabulous showrunner, and Shonda Rhimes is the best of the best. But it wasn't until Viola moved in and owned that role. And by the way, there were so many things about that role, and not just racial, in as much as, you know, I talked about the rules that were set in stone. Look, the rules that were set in stone that we felt when I came in 5 years ago was not just, you know, you had to be the third detective, but you had to be morally clear. You had to have a square jaw. You had to be likable. Every note was about likability.
Yes.
And here's the thing. And by the way, I got some notes about moral clarity even when we got to How to Get Away with Murder. But you went away and got away with murder. And you did it with a sort of sexiness and a passion and a talent that just screamed from the screen. And everybody loved it, and then you capped it with what I thought was an incredibly moving speech at the Emmys. And we, for one, sitting in the audience, were deeply moved by that. It was wonderful.
I was just telling Viola that my daughter, my 21-year-old daughter, do you mind if I say it? My 21-year-old daughter is a big fan of hers. She told me she's obsessed when she found out I was coming here and I was going to be on this panel. You know, I don't impress my daughters very much, even though, you know, millions of people watch us every night on the newscast. But if I say, guess who's going to be on my panel? Viola Davis. Oh, Mom, I'm obsessed with her. We watch the show all the time. She's a badass. Okay. Now, I was just saying, when you know, how has our language evolved that is one of the best compliments that you can possibly get? I mean, that's really a compliment. She thinks that you are the best.
Oh, thank you.
We'll skip the word this time around. Paul, you have always said that the network's job is to reflect America. Do you see diversity as ABC's identity?
It is. I mean, look, we very much defined our brand when we sat down 5 years ago. We were talking beforehand about Brazilian soaps. I had worked on Brazilian soaps when I was 22. I'll date myself. And we wanted to reinvent soaps, but we also wanted to find something that had been in ABC for a long time but hadn't been brought to the fore, and that was smart with heart. Smart, emotional, and incredibly passionate television driven by soaps and strong voices. And what we really wanted to add, and we've spent 5 years doing it, is that word inclusion. We didn't actually like the word diversity because it seemed other. We like the word inclusive because it is the American Broadcasting Company, and I'm an immigrant, and we wanted to reflect America as it is in all its shapes and colors. And it was interesting because, number one, there were many obstacles before we did it, but it has worked. Like, you know, I'm showing off, but we were the #1 entertainment network, and it was driven by How to Get Away with Murder and Scandal and Modern Family and Blackish and Fresh Off the Boat. So here's the thing. Look, we had been trying for a long time to have people on our screens who are diverse, and we've done that from Eva Longoria and Sofia Vergara. But the real move to truly be inclusive is about the voices who tell those stories. And you have to have executives who are diverse, but you have to have voices as strong as Shonda Rhimes or Pete Nowalk or Kenya, who does Blackish, or Nahnatchka Khan, who does Fresh Off the Boat. And the most interesting thing about all of it was these voices, they don't just attract an Asian audience for Fresh Off the Boat or a black audience for Blackish. They are relatable to everybody in America. And so the more specific the voice you have, the more universal you can be. And that was a sort of fantastically empowering idea, that we could release all this creativity by so doing, and it worked.
Elena, you have a video also. We have a clip of Empire, which addresses homophobia, and then I'd like to discuss how you think that this series reflects the larger cultural and societal themes.
It certainly helps for people to understand. It helps to have a conversation, to put the conversation out there for people to see themselves reflected, to see their experiences reflected, especially their painful, shameful experiences. And I personally have told a lot of stories about gayness. This isn't my story. This is a very specific story, and it's Lee Daniels' story, and it's a story about homophobia in the Black community, and he told it with great attention to detail and without trying to make it palatable to anyone. And that's what makes it powerful, and that's why I think people have responded to it so powerfully.
Right, this happens to be in the African American community, but it's the same thing, I think, across the board. I know so much in the very macho Latin community as well. But do you think that, what role, I should say, do you think that television should play in the political and cultural discourse in the country today?
I think it's a dicey question. I mean, I think we should play a big role, but it's been a taboo conversation for those of us who make television for such a long time. And those of us who make television with a view to activism had to be very stealthy about it. And I think we're allowed to be a little bit more open about the fact that we feel a passion for advocacy and activism. And every voice and every story deserves to be represented out there, but it's the people who have a passion, who have something to say, who ought to be out there telling these stories.
Now, let's talk a little bit about how important diversity is behind the scenes, behind the camera. According to Actors Guild report, staff employment for people of color decreased from the 2011-2012 season to the 13-14 season from 15.6% to 13.7%. And as far as executive producers of color, 7.8%, it decreased to 5.5%. If there aren't people out there creating these roles, hiring people, working behind the scenes, how important is it to be diverse? Not just what people see.
It's critical.
It's the characters that people create and the stories that people create.
Yeah, behind the camera is the critical issue. First of all, it starts, and I can speak for myself as an executive, it starts in your executive ranks. You know, and we've made absolutely sure that our head of drama and our head of comedy and our head of network, our head of studio and our head of casting are all diverse. It has to start there, but sort of the revolution that we got to and really made such a difference to us, and that's why our numbers have gone up there, was about showrunners, because television is a showrunner medium. And the key is to find voices and strong voices. Sometimes, and in some communities, and we've had less success in the Latino community than we have in the Asian American community or than the African American community. But some of those communities are actually not encouraging their kids to go into entertainment. And they prefer their kids to be doctors and lawyers. And our mission, and we have a whole Latino Voices push, is to say, this is a fabulous career, and yes, it does matter. And to your point about political activism, I would say two brief things. First of all, some of it is not about political activism. It's just if you have Glee or Mitch and Cam on Modern Family, they become a family member. And there is something about every American loving these two as a family member that makes them more tolerant and makes it more powerful. Now, I'm not pretending that we can be as powerful as political movements, but there is something deeply powerful about that. Look, we're primarily in the business of entertainment, and that's what we go to do to make great storytelling. But if along the way people can have family members like those, it makes a big difference. I mean, it really does. The second thing I would say is that we did something which was a little risky and sort of fun, particularly in comedy, which was we lent into race. To your point, you know, for a long time the idea had been let's not discuss it. And if you look at the Cosby Show, it's not discussed. But you know, Blackish and Fresh Off the Boat, this is leaning into immigration. Look at the names, right? And these are African American and immigrant writers who are saying, I want to make fun of this. I actually want to play in this area. This is not taboo to me, and I think I have a right to play in this area because of where I came from and where my authentic voice comes. And so if your voice is authentic, you can do anything. That's what I would say. I
think to all of you, the same question. What do you think is how important diversity is behind the camera?
Well, I think that I would echo what Paley has said and what Ilene has said, that it's a showrunner's medium, and the narrative reflects the voice of the showrunner. And the fact that, I don't know, Shonda Rhimes is a woman of color, I certainly see that in the thread of even Annalise, of Olivia Pope. And I will go on to say, it's like Arthur Miller said. He said, my characters don't lead the most noble lives, but if they have been through something, their story deserves to be told. And, there is something about the mess of what is Annalise Keating, and that she's still in the body of a black woman, but there's not a limit to her humanity that I don't think that I could have gotten from a white male showrunner. I don't think that I would have gotten that freedom. Even though Shonda did not create it, Pete Nowak did, but it's the umbrella, and then the umbrella of ABC,
I don't know.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know if you read this. This week there was an article, very timely article in the New York Times by Aziz Ansari, talking precisely about, I don't know if any of you have read it, it was talking precisely about diversity. And one of the things that he talks about, it just reminded me with what you said, is that he wouldn't be in the position that he is creating this show, Master of None, if it had not been for a straight white guy, in this case it was Mike Schur, that gave him the opportunity, jobs in Parks and Recreation. Without that opportunity, we wouldn't have developed the experience necessary to tell our stories. So if you're a straight white guy, do the industry a solid and give minorities a second look. So,
well, as a straight white guy on the panel,
there's something else here that he wrote that he sent to Entertainment Weekly that I thought was really, really interesting. And being the token Latina on this panel and on this stage, I can relate to this. He says, when they cast these shows, they're like, we already have a minority guy or a minority girl. There would never be two Indian people in one show. With Asian people, there can be one, but there can't be two. Black people, there can be two, but they can't be three because then it becomes a black show.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Gay people there can be two. Women, there can be two. But Asian people, Indian people, there can be one, but there can't be two. Is that true?
No.
Why?
No. I mean, there's a truth in the history there, but we put up a show called Fresh Off the Boat, and I don't know if everybody in the room has seen this show. And here's the thing, where he's right is if you're sitting there and you have showrunners who are white, and you're the network and you want to see some diversity, then you're sitting there as the network president in a casting session and you're trying to impose from top down something that happens. But if you have a script that's written by Nahnatchka Khan or another one that's written by Ken Jeong, and they're telling the story of an immigrant Chinese family, or on the case of Ken, his own family, this is not imposed from the top down. This is absolutely integral to the storytelling that's there. And here's the thing, we have a hit show on our network, and actually two now with Dr. Ken, that are Asian American shows, and they're not just for Asian American audiences. So this has changed dramatically over the last couple of years, and it's a wonderful thing.
I'll tell you. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, because I want Ilene to talk. I really do.
I do too.
Well, firstly, I think, that was probably a reflection or an analysis of something that once was true.
Yeah.
No longer. Essential for us to ignore the rules. We have to, because they're wrong, they don't apply, they hold us back, they stifle creativity. Something I learned on the L Word that now applies in Empire clearly. When I did the L Word and we first started talking about it, and it was the first show that was about lesbians, and it was a show about lesbians. I mean, that's what it was. And I was told the show will be more successful and reach more people if you also have some straight people and you tell their stories and you mix it up. And I thought, of course, I'll do that. And then when the time came, it was just, I don't want to spend my hour telling the stories of straight people. They have their shows.
But the tokenism still exists. I know that I was writing a column for 10 years, and it was syndicated by King Features, and I remember so many newspapers saying, we already have a Hispanic columnist. No, thank you. So it does happen quite a bit, at least with the Hispanic community. And now is when I get to the Hispanic community, and why is it that we are 17% of the population, yet only 2 or 3% of people on television? Having major, there's no one with a major role except for Jane the Virgin, and they play a Hispanic family.
Yeah, we've actually found it harder to crack the Latino audience. I mean, we have higher Latino numbers, of course not including Univision, than the English-speaking networks, but we didn't succeed with Cristela in the way that we had succeeded with, you know, with Scandal and with Murder and with Blackish, with Fresh Off the Boat.
Was it the ratings?
You mean, yeah, when I say we didn't succeed, I mean we didn't get we didn't get enough ratings for it. But that's, you know, in that particular case, we actually didn't land the voice. Cristela was a fantastic stand-up. We didn't land the half hour. Sadly, we'd had a show that we developed with Jenny Rivera the previous year, just, you know, when she sadly passed away. And then this year and I don't want to jinx it because I love him, we have some development with Gabriel Iglesias, you know, Fluffy. And look, this guy fills stadiums. He's the funniest stand-up, I think, working in the, I mean, I love him. And we're developing a half hour for him. So we will crack this as we've cracked the other ones. But it definitely takes, to your point about what you wanted to write for your hour, it takes a showrunner of vision and obstinacy and patience to build something great.
So then do we need more showrunners? Do we need more people
Yes, we need more
that are
Latino
Hispanics
showrunners.
that can develop some of these shows? You know, the fastest growing TV demographic viewers between 18 and 49 are Hispanic. And I'm sure that many of you can relate to this, that the buying power of Hispanics is $1.3 trillion. And that about 75% of Latinos are actually bilingual and have a choice of watching English or Spanish. And if they're watching more Spanish than English, it's not because of the language, it's because of the content, because they don't see themselves reflected. So aren't the networks losing out on the opportunity of having a viewership that is not only big now, but can only grow? The Hispanics will be 30% of the population in 2016.
Couldn't be more important, and we are pushing, I mean, obviously it's fantastic to have Sofia Vergara and Lana Parrilla and so many Latino stars on the network, but once we get strong Latino voices, and we have a big push to do that, then we'll get more, I think.
And in the past, what would have happened is Cristela didn't work, so all the networks would have said, oh, that doesn't work, we're not going to bother. But as you can see, Paul continues to believe in the mission, something will connect, and then everything will change.
Are the roles, go ahead, you were going to say something about that.
No, I mean, I'm an actress up here, and Paley and Ilene Chaiken, they're you know, executives, so I come with a very different voice. But what I wanted to talk about is the power of courage and imagination in this business. Courage being foremost. And the reason why I'm thinking that is I did a movie called The Help, and I remember that the whole premise behind the movie was to tell the story from the maid's perspective. Okay, that's the premise. I mean, I'm sure everyone knows the premise of the movie and the book. And so Skeeter, this young white girl, sets out to write this story, but absolutely how these maids feel living in 1963 Mississippi. Their voice, unbridled. And I remember there's a scene in the movie where this big charity event, and me and Minnie, we're at the charity event, we're watching all the white women come in, and they're dressed like, you know, ostriches. And we're laughing. Did you see Miss Lee fall? She look a mess. Bah, 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 bah. And so me and Octavia Spencer came up with this little bit that I thought was really great, you know? I said, yeah, you saw blah, blah, blah. She said, yeah, she look a mess, girl. well, you know what? Let me go serve some of these crackers to the crackers. Hysterical, right? But I remember they cut that from the movie because, you know, it's like Paul said, it's the moral barometers of what they want to see, people of color. They said, it's too mean. It's too mean for Minnie and you know, Aibileen to speak that way. And I'm thinking, okay, 1963 Mississippi, you had people being thrown in ditches in the Tallahatchie River, and it's too mean to say crackers, serving crackers to the cracker. What exactly do you think these women are talking about when they go to But what I'm saying is it needs the courage of beyond race, really, the courage and the imagination of a network, of executives, of showrunners to have a strong enough voice, like Paul and Ilene has said, so they could create narratives that are dynamic. Because I don't care who anyone is. I don't care if the character is gay, transgender, whatever. If the voice is dynamic enough, you're going to lean in. You're going to lean in. I don't care if you're 84, served in World War II, never met a homosexual, I don't know. You're going to lean in because it's the voice is so strong. But I think I'm probably repeating what they said, but I just wanted to reiterate it because as actors, you know, especially actors of color, that's what we sorely miss.
And from a network, just to add a small thing, from a network perspective, there isn't a scene, and Pete Nowalk gets a lot of credit, there isn't a scene that Viola does that doesn't make you want to lean in. They're just electric and brilliant and not morally clear and fascinating. So courage you see, I think, every day on the show.
Like my daughter says, she's a BA. Yeah. I want to talk to you about the Obama factor. Do you think that the fact that we have an African-American president has had any kind of influence on the fact that maybe there are more opportunities for African-Americans on television?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I don't know why I hate the Obama effect. It's like, I don't know why I hate that term. Like, so we got a black president, so it's like, okay, we're happy that black people are in the world now. But, I just think we know more. We know more, we know better. We know that it's no longer the Brady Bunch. We reject that idea. We're like Cindy Brady, no one had that life. It was a fantasy. You know, we now walk down the street and see a bus stop with a blonde woman with a baby with crinkly curly hair sitting in the carriage. That's our lives now. We have Caitlyn Jenner. You know, we have transgenders. We have, you know, gay and lesbian couples adopting babies. You know, we now see it in commercials, thank God. You know, you really do. So we now know better. And now art has got to reflect life. It's got to reflect who we are, you know? We've got to see ourselves. And I don't call it the Obama effect. I call it the 21st century effect, you know?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. Did you want to add to that?
Sure. I mean, look, we make these decisions. We're a group of people sitting in a network in a studio. And Viola's exactly right. It's not the Obama effect. We sit down and we say, why should we let the taboos and the preconceptions of 20, 30, and 40 years stand in the way of our ability to tell extraordinary stories? Why shouldn't we unleash the kind of dynamism that Viola represents on the screen and that Blackish represents and that Fresh Off the Boat and Scandal represents? And by so doing, just because they're good, and they're not all good, we've talked about some that have failed, but when they're good, everybody will come in and watch them. So we do it to make great entertainment and to reflect the country as it stands.
So what's the solution? I know that up to now, we have all agreed that there has been quite a bit of progress when it comes to having minorities reflected on television and in film, but not as much as there could be. So what needs to happen so that minorities have the representation that they deserve, so that these television shows actually look like America? almost 40% of the population is
Yeah,
minority.
we have very, very big diversity numbers. I can't speak for our competitors. I think your point about Latinos, though, is absolutely true. And we believe that, which is why we've got this big Latino Voices push, that a lot of this is starting very much younger, to find those showrunners and those actors who really want to be in this industry. That means having, and we've had a lot of different, very strong groups developing Latino voices, but now we're going much earlier to the high schools, to the universities, to the communities, to really develop those voices. And we will get there as surely as we have for the other communities.
And in a perfect world, what would television look like? In your perfect world?
I don't know that there is a perfect world or a perfect world of television, but it would be a hell of a lot better if it looked more like America and if it just looked bolder and more colorful and more interesting and more real and more audacious in every way.
You said in the beginning that when I asked you about if you're happy with the way things are in 2015, you said, yes, but we still have a way to go. What would be your perfect scenario?
Just took a nap today. I'm not into solving the problems of the world. But I will say,
Because the networks are getting away with murder.
Yeah. But I will say that, when I was given, I'm an artist. I consider myself to be an artist, first and foremost. And when I was given Annalise Keating, I tell the story a lot that I saw the pilot and I was horrified because, you got to look at yourself with my lashes and my, little chubby waist that I thought was very chubby waist. And I didn't look the way I thought I would look. I had an idea in my head when I thought of the adjectives: sexy, dynamic, mysterious. And I didn't see sexy, dynamic, mysterious.
We did, but all right.
But what I'm leading to is I said, why not? And I think that that's where it all begins, is that question of why not? Why can't I be sexy? I reject the notion in the past that dark-skinned women cannot be beautiful. I reject the fact that if I take my wig off and do a whole scene with my fro, that somehow that is taboo. I reject the fact that I have to be a size 2. I reject the fact that I have to be likable. I'd rather be interesting. Nobody asks, Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver, or James Gandolfini, or Anthony Hopkins that they're, were you concerned that you were likable in Silence of the Lambs? That somehow you have to reject all the things that people have told you were. And I think it starts there.
That's amazing. And I don't think, who can follow that? I don't think that. On that note, I think.